Thomas hadn't slept in 3 days. The past due bills were spread across his kitchen table, the red stamps mocking him in the dim light of the apartment. He ran his fingers through his messy hair and looked at the clock. 2:17 a.m. His daughter Lily had fallen asleep hours ago, her soft snores coming from the bedroom they shared whenever money got tight, which lately had been all the time. 2 more weeks, he whispered to himself, calculating how long they could survive before the electricity would be cut off. The factory layoffs had hit without warning. 20 years of loyalty meant nothing to the new owners who had moved operations overseas. At 42, Thomas was starting over with nothing but a 10-year-old daughter to support and a stack of rejection letters from every job he'd applied to. The idea had come from his neighbor, Mrs. Chen. "Rent the spare room," she'd suggested when she caught Thomas staring blankly at the eviction warning taped to his door. "My nephew did that when times were hard. Just be careful who you pick." Thomas had cleaned out the small second bedroom, which had mostly been used for storage since his wife had passed away 5 years ago. He'd posted a simple ad online, "Room for rent, $400 a month, quiet building, utilities included." It was below market rate, but he needed someone quickly. 3 days later, she appeared at his door. The young woman looked about 25, wearing a baggy sweatshirt that didn't quite hide her pregnancy. Her clothes were wrinkled as if she'd been wearing them for days, but there was something about the way she stood, straight-backed with her chin slightly raised, that seemed out of place. "I'm here about the room," she said. Her voice surprisingly clear and well-spoken. Thomas hesitated. He hadn't expected a pregnant woman, and certainly not one who looked like she might give birth any day. "I'm not sure if I can pay 3 months in advance," she said quickly, pulling out a worn envelope. Cash, that had sealed it. Thomas showed her the small room with its single bed and old dresser. She didn't even look around much before nodding. "It's perfect. I'm Thomas," he said, extending his hand. She paused for just a moment. "Olivia," she replied, her handshake firm despite her delicate appearance. Lily had taken to their new housemate immediately. She'd bounced into the kitchen the next morning to find Olivia awkwardly attempting to use their ancient coffee maker. "You have to jiggle the switch 3 times or it won't start," Lily explained, demonstrating with practiced ease. "Dad says we'll get a new one someday, but I like this one. It sounds like a robot when it makes coffee." Olivia smiled, her whole face transforming. "Thanks for the help. I'm not very good with kitchen things." "That's okay," Lily shrugged. "Dad says everyone's got different talents. I can't whistle, but I can tie my shoes super fast." Thomas watched from the doorway as his daughter chatted happily with the stranger who was now living in their home. There was something odd about Olivia, the way she examined the coffee maker like it was an alien artifact. How she kept her few possessions meticulously arranged in her small room. The expensive-looking watch she wore that seemed to contradict her otherwise simple appearance. During dinner that first night, Lily had innocently asked about the baby. "When's it coming? Is it a boy or girl? Can I feel it kick?" Thomas had started to scold her for being nosy, but Olivia just smiled. "The baby should arrive in about 6 weeks. And yes, you can feel a kick if the baby's in the mood." She guided Lily's small hand to a spot on her swollen belly, and Lily's eyes had widened in wonder at the gentle movement. "Where's the dad?" Lily asked, causing Thomas to choke on his water. "Lily, that's not—" "It's okay," Olivia said quietly. "He's not in the picture anymore." Something in her voice made Thomas think there was much more to that story. In the coming days, Thomas noticed more peculiarities. Olivia seemed bewildered by the simplest household tasks. She'd stared at the washing machine for 10 minutes before Thomas had shown her how to use it. When he'd mentioned clipping coupons for groceries, she'd looked genuinely confused. One evening, he came home from another failed job interview to find Olivia helping Lily with her math homework. She was explaining fractions with such clarity and patience that Lily, who normally hated math, was nodding enthusiastically. "You're really good at teaching," Thomas remarked later. "I had good teachers," Olivia replied, that same guarded tone returning to her voice. The biggest surprise came when Olivia offered to cook dinner as a thank you. Thomas had agreed, though he worried about what she might manage given her obvious unfamiliarity with kitchen basics. But the meal she prepared was unlike anything he'd ever tasted. Some kind of delicate fish with herbs and a side dish he couldn't even name. "This is amazing," Thomas said. watching in amusement as Lily tried to copy Olivia's proper table manners. "Just something I picked up," Olivia said with a small shrug, though her cheeks flushed with pleasure at the compliment. Later that night, after Lily had gone to bed, Thomas found Olivia sitting by the window, staring out at the city lights. She was absent-mindedly rubbing her stomach, a gesture he remembered his wife making when she was pregnant with Lily. "Everything okay?" he asked. She started slightly. "Yes, fine. Just thinking." "Look," Thomas said, sitting across from her. "I don't want to pry, but if you're in some kind of trouble—" "I'm not," she said quickly. Too quickly. "I just needed a fresh start." Thomas nodded slowly. "Well, everyone deserves that much." A week into her stay, Thomas finally landed a job interview at a shipping warehouse. It wasn't his dream position, but it paid enough to keep them afloat. As he was rushing to leave, fumbling with his one decent tie, Olivia approached him. "Here, let me," she said, taking the tie and expertly knotting it. Her fingers moved with practiced precision. "Where'd you learn to do that?" Thomas asked. "My father," she said simply, then stepped back to examine her work. "Perfect. You'll get this job." Her confidence bolstered his own, and Thomas felt a flicker of hope for the first time in months. Maybe things were finally turning around. That evening, Thomas returned home to find Olivia and Lily sitting at the old upright piano that had been gathering dust since his wife's death. Olivia's fingers moved across the keys with stunning skill, playing a classical piece Thomas vaguely recognized. "Dad," Lily exclaimed when she saw him. "Olivia can play piano. Like really play. And she's teaching me." "Just the basics," Olivia said, looking almost embarrassed at being caught. "I hope you don't mind." "Not at all," Thomas said, still stunned by the beautiful music that had been flowing from their neglected instrument. "Where did you learn to play like that?" "Lessons," she said vaguely. "When I was younger." Later, as Thomas put Lily to bed, his daughter whispered, "I think Olivia might be a princess in disguise." "Like in my books," Thomas chuckled and kissed her forehead. "I think she's just someone trying to figure things out, sweetie. Like all of us." But as the days passed, Thomas began to wonder if Lily's fairy tale imagination wasn't completely off base. Olivia spoke with an educated vocabulary she sometimes seemed to be deliberately simplifying. Once, when she thought no one was listening, Thomas overheard her speaking fluent French on a phone call she quickly ended when she noticed him. Most telling was the incident with the leaky faucet. When the bathroom sink began dripping uncontrollably, Thomas had groaned at the thought of another expense they couldn't afford. Olivia had watched him struggle with it before asking, "Do you have a wrench?" To his surprise, she efficiently disassembled the faucet, replaced the washer, and reassembled it, all while explaining that she had picked up a few things from watching home repair shows. But Thomas had noticed the confidence in her hands. This wasn't knowledge from TV. Who was this woman, really? And what was she running from? The answers began to emerge 3 weeks after Olivia had moved in. Thomas was watching the evening news while waiting for Lily to finish her shower when a familiar face appeared on the screen. He turned up the volume as the news anchor spoke. "The search continues for Olivia Harrington, daughter of billionaire real estate developer Richard Harrington, who disappeared over a month ago. Sources close to the family reveal the 26-year-old heiress is believed to be in the late stages of pregnancy. The Harrington family has increased the reward for information leading to her safe return to $100,000. The photo on screen was unmistakable, their tenant with professionally styled hair and designer clothes. But undoubtedly the same woman. Thomas sat frozen as the pieces clicked into place. Her unfamiliarity with everyday tasks, her refined manner of speaking, the expensive watch, the classical piano skills. He was housing a runaway billionaire's daughter. When the bathroom door opened and Lily emerged in her pajamas, Thomas quickly changed the channel. "Go brush your teeth, sweetie. I'll be there in a minute to tuck you in." His mind raced. Should he confront her? Call the number on screen? There was a reward that could solve all their financial problems. But something held him back. The memory of Olivia's face when she talked about the baby's father not being in the picture. The way she seemed to be hiding from something more than just running away from wealth. As he tucked Lily in, his daughter yawned and said, "I like having Olivia here. She makes the house feel less empty." Thomas kissed her forehead, his decision made. Whatever Olivia Harrington was running from, he wouldn't be the one to send her back there, at least not until... He was brought in by ambulance an hour ago. The receptionist checked again. Oh, we have a Jane Doe matching that description. Are you family? Yes, Thomas said without hesitation. I'm her. She's living with me. She's having my baby. The lie came easily when he saw the woman's skeptical look. He was directed to the maternity floor, where he found Olivia in a small room, hooked up to monitors. Her face was pale, but she looked relieved to see him. Preeclampsia, she explained weakly. The doctor says my blood pressure is too high. They're watching for signs of distress. Thomas sat beside her, taking her hand. Everything will be okay. I didn't give them my real name, she whispered. I was afraid they'd recognize it. But they keep asking for insurance ID. Don't worry about that now, he assured her. A doctor entered, reviewing the chart. Your wife's condition is concerning, she told Thomas. We may need to induce labor if her blood pressure doesn't stabilize soon. Neither of them corrected the wife assumption. After the doctor left, Olivia squeezed his hand. Thomas, I need you to promise me something. If anything happens to me, nothing's going to happen, he interrupted. Please, she insisted. If anything happens, don't let my father take the baby. Promise me. Looking into her frightened eyes, Thomas nodded. I promise. The hospital room TV was on mute in the corner, but a breaking news banner caught Thomas's attention. He froze when he saw Richard Harrington's face appear on screen, alongside a recent photo of Olivia. The caption read, Billionaire offers $250,000 reward for missing daughter. The reward had been increased. Someone at the hospital would surely recognize her soon. As if on cue, a nurse paused in the doorway, looking from Olivia to the television with widening eyes. She hurried away without entering. Thomas knew they had very little time left before their quiet existence was shattered forever. He's found me, Olivia whispered, tears spilling down her cheeks as she too noticed the TV. It's over. Thomas stood, his mind racing. Not yet, it isn't. He stepped into the hallway just as the same nurse was returning with a supervisor, both glancing at him with poorly concealed interest. Down the corridor, he could see a security guard speaking into a radio, occasionally looking their way. Thomas took a deep breath and headed back into Olivia's room. Whatever happened next, one thing was certain. The fragile peace they'd built was about to be tested in ways none of them had imagined. Thomas closed the door behind him and turned to Olivia, who was attempting to sit up despite the monitors attached to her. We need a plan, he said, keeping his voice low. They've recognized you, Olivia's face crumpled. It's too late. I can't even walk out of here. She gestured to her belly and the IV in her arm. They'll be calling my father right now. Thomas paced the small room, thinking rapidly. Maybe that's not such a bad thing. What? Olivia stared at him in disbelief. Hear me out, Thomas said, sitting on the edge of her bed. You're sick. The baby could be at risk. You need proper medical care, not a man with no insurance trying to deliver a baby in a bathroom. But my father will have to go through me first, Thomas said with unexpected firmness. I promised you I wouldn't let him take your baby, and I meant it. Before Olivia could respond, the door opened. A hospital administrator entered, followed by the security guard Thomas had spotted earlier. Ms. Harrington, the administrator said, confirming their fears. I'm Dr. Walsh, the hospital director. We've contacted your father. He's sending his private medical team. They'll be arriving within the hour. Olivia's monitors beeped as her heart rate increased. I don't want them. I want to stay with my own doctors. Dr. Walsh looked uncomfortable. Your father has made arrangements. She said no. Thomas interrupted, standing between them and Olivia's bed. She's an adult. She gets to decide her own medical care. The security guard stepped forward. Sir, perhaps we should talk outside. Thomas didn't move. I'm not leaving her. The standoff was broken by the arrival of Olivia's obstetrician, who took in the scene with a frown. What's going on here? My patient needs to remain calm. Doctor, Olivia said desperately. I don't want to change medical teams. I don't want to be moved, please. The obstetrician looked at the hospital director. Her blood pressure is already dangerously high. Any additional stress could trigger seizures or placental abruption. She turned to Thomas. Are you the father? Not of the baby, Thomas admitted. But I'm her friend. She's been living with me and my daughter. Then you should stay, the doctor decided. Addressing Dr. Walsh, she added, "I need everyone else out. My patient's health comes first. Whatever family drama is happening can wait." Reluctantly, the administrator and security guard left, though Thomas knew they'd be right outside. "Thank you," Olivia whispered to the doctor. "Don't thank me yet," the doctor replied. "Your pressure readings aren't improving. We need to consider inducing labor soon." The next hour passed in tense anticipation. Thomas called Mrs. Chen, who assured him that Lily was fine and had been fed dinner. He wanted to bring his daughter to the hospital, but he wasn't sure what chaos might await them when Richard Harrington arrived. Just after 8 p.m., a commotion in the hallway signaled that moment had come. The door burst open, and an imposing man in his 60s entered, followed by a team of people in suits and medical scrubs. Richard Harrington was taller than Thomas had expected. With silver hair and the same piercing blue eyes as his daughter, he wore an expensive suit despite the late hour, and his commanding presence immediately filled the small room. "Olivia," he said, his voice surprisingly gentle as he approached the bed. "Thank God you're all right." Olivia shrank back against her pillows. "Dad, please don't do this." Richard noticed Thomas for the first time. "Who are you?" he demanded, tone sharpening. "Thomas Wilson." "Olivia's been renting a room from me." Richard's eyes narrowed. "So you're the one who's been hiding her?" He turned to one of the suited men. "Call the police. I want him arrested for kidnapping and extortion." "No," Olivia cried. "Dad, stop it. He didn't kidnap me. He didn't even know who I was until recently. And he never asked for money." The monitors beeped in warning as her blood pressure spiked again. The hospital obstetrician pushed her way through the crowd. "Everyone who isn't immediate family needs to leave right now," she ordered. "Mr. Harrington, your daughter's condition is serious." "This stress isn't helping," Richard waved his hand dismissively. "Dr. Phillips here is a top specialist from New York. He'll be taking over my daughter's care." A distinguished-looking doctor stepped forward with a chart. "I've reviewed her case. I recommend immediate transfer to Mercy Memorial, where we have a room prepared in their private wing." The hospital obstetrician stood her ground. "The patient has explicitly refused transfer, and moving her in this condition poses significant risks. I'll sign whatever waivers are necessary," Richard said impatiently. "You can't," the doctor replied. "Only the patient can consent, and she's refused." Richard turned to his daughter. "Olivia, stop this nonsense. You're coming with me where I can make sure you receive proper care." "The care here is fine," Olivia insisted. "I'm not going anywhere." Thomas saw the genuine fear in Olivia's eyes and stepped closer to her bed. "Mr. Harrington, your daughter is an adult who's made her decision. Please respect that." Richard's face flushed with anger. "You have no idea what you're involved in. My daughter needs psychiatric evaluation. She's not thinking clearly." "Because I don't agree with you?" Olivia's voice rose. "Because I won't let you control my life or my baby's life?" "This isn't the place," Richard began. "No, let's do this here," Olivia interrupted, a lifetime of suppressed feelings breaking free. "Let everyone hear how you threatened to take my baby if I didn't get rid of it. How you destroyed Miguel's family because he wasn't good enough for your precious bloodline." The room fell silent. Even Richard's entourage looked uncomfortable. "I was trying to protect you," Richard finally said, his voice lower. "That boy was using you to get to our money." "Miguel didn't even know who you were when we met," Olivia countered. "He thought I was a college student like him. And when he found out, he still wanted to move into his own place, get a regular job, not take anything from you." Thomas could see the pain in both their faces, years of misunderstandings and hurt feelings creating a chasm between father and daughter. "Mr. Harrington," he said quietly, "I have a daughter too. Sometimes we think we know what's best for our children, but we have to trust them to make their own choices eventually." Richard turned to him with cold eyes. "And what would you know about raising a child in my daughter's position? About the vultures who circle wealth looking for any weakness?" "Nothing," Thomas admitted. "But I know about loving a child enough to let them find their own path. And I know Olivia is stronger than you give her credit for." The tension in the room was broken by a sudden gasp from Olivia. She clutched her stomach, face contorting in pain. "Something's wrong," she whispered. The monitors began alarming as her blood pressure spiked dangerously high. The obstetrician rushed to her side, checking readings and examining her quickly. "Her placenta is separating. We need to get this baby out now." She pressed an emergency button on the wall. "Prep or 2 stat!" Within moments, the room filled with medical staff. A nurse disconnected monitors while another prepared Olivia for transport. "What's happening?" Richard demanded. "Placental, eh?" "Ruption," the doctor explained tersely. "The placenta is detaching from the uterine wall. It's life-threatening for both mother and baby. We need to perform an emergency C-section." As they began wheeling Olivia from the room, she reached out for Thomas's hand. "Don't leave me," she pleaded. Thomas looked at the doctor, who nodded. "Immediate family can come to the surgical floor." "He's not family," Richard objected. Olivia's grip tightened on Thomas's hand. "He's the closest thing I have to family right now," she said, tears streaming down her face. "Please, Dad, just this once, let me choose." Something in her words seemed to reach Richard. Perhaps it was the genuine fear in his daughter's eyes, or the realization that his grandchild's life hung in the balance. After a moment's hesitation, he stepped back. "Fine," he said stiffly. Thomas followed the gurney down the corridor, still holding Olivia's hand as staff rushed around them preparing for emergency surgery. In the chaos, all the tensions and complications of their situation faded away, replaced by the simple primal fear for the lives of Olivia and her unborn child. At the OR doors, a nurse handed Thomas scrubs and a mask. "Put these on quickly, if we don't have much time." As Thomas changed, he saw Richard standing alone in the waiting area, suddenly looking older and less imposing. Their eyes met briefly, and Thomas saw something unexpected: vulnerability in the powerful man's gaze. The surgery itself was a blur of bright lights, urgent medical terminology, and the steady voice of the obstetrician directing her team. Thomas stood by Olivia's head, holding her hand behind the surgical drape, murmuring reassurances despite his own fear. "It's going to be okay," he kept saying, as much to himself as to her. After what seemed like hours but was probably only minutes, a new sound filled the operating room, the strong, angry cry of a newborn. "It's a boy," the doctor announced, lifting a squirming, red-faced infant above the drape for Olivia to see, small but mighty. Tears streamed down Olivia's face as she caught a glimpse of her son. "Is he okay?" "He looks great," the doctor assured her as a nurse took the baby to a warming station for assessment. 5 pounds 8 ounces. Good strong lungs." Thomas felt a wave of relief so intense it made his knees weak. He squeezed Olivia's hand. "You did it. He's beautiful." "Go check on him," Olivia urged. "Make sure he's really okay." Thomas approached the warming station where nurses were cleaning and examining the tiny boy. His heart swelled at the sight of the infant's scrunched face and flailing arms. Despite everything, this little person had arrived safely in the world. One of the nurses looked up. "Would you like to hold him? We'll need to take him to the NICU soon for monitoring, but you can have a minute." Before Thomas could explain he wasn't the father, the tiny bundle was placed in his arms. The weight of the newborn, so light yet somehow so significant, brought unexpected tears to his eyes. "Hey there, little guy," he whispered. "You caused quite a stir today." He carried the baby back to Olivia, who was still being tended to by the surgical team. Her face lit up as Thomas carefully lowered the swaddled infant for her to see. "He's perfect," she breathed, reaching one trembling hand to touch her son's cheek. In that moment, looking at Olivia and her newborn, Thomas felt a shifting inside him, a recognition that somehow, through the strangest of circumstances, these two had become family to him and Lily. A nurse approached. "We need to take him to the NICU now, standard procedure for premature deliveries." As the baby was taken away, Thomas noticed a figure watching through the OR window. Richard Harrington, his expression unreadable as he gazed at his newly born grandson. The next few hours passed in a haze of waiting rooms, whispered updates and cups of terrible hospital coffee. Olivia was moved to recovery. The baby was settled in the NICU, and an uneasy truce fell over the unlikely group of people brought together by the night's events. When Thomas was finally allowed to visit Olivia in her recovery room, he found Richard already there, sitting stiffly in a chair by her bed. They both looked up as Thomas entered. "The nurses say the baby is doing well," Thomas reported. "They think he'll only need to stay in the NICU for observation, maybe a day or two." "Thank you," Olivia said softly. She looked exhausted but radiant in the way new mothers often do. "For everything, Thomas. I don't know what I would have done without you." Richard cleared his throat. "Yes, it seems I owe you thanks as well, Mr. Wilson, for looking after my daughter when she felt she couldn't come to me." The admission clearly cost him, and Thomas recognized it for the olive branch it was. "She's an incredible person," Thomas said simply. "And now she's an incredible mother." Richard looked at his daughter with complex emotions playing across his face. "Have you chosen a name for my grandson?" Olivia hesitated, then said, "Gabriel. Gabriel Miguel Wilson Harrington." Thomas started at the inclusion of his surname. "Olivia, you don't have to." "I want to," she said firmly. "If that's okay." Thomas nodded, too moved to speak. Richard raised an eyebrow but made no comment on the name. Instead, he said, "I've been thinking about what you said earlier, about letting children find their own path." He paused, seemingly struggling with his next words. "Perhaps I've been too controlling." Olivia looked shocked at this admission from her usually unyielding father. "I still believe that boy took advantage of you," Richard continued. "But I was wrong to threaten you. Wrong to try to force your decision about the baby." He straightened in his chair. "I'd like to help if you'll let me. Not by taking over, but by supporting whatever you decide to do next." Olivia studied her father's face, searching for sincerity. "Do you mean that?" "I do." Richard glanced at Thomas. "Your friend here made me realize that I was about to lose you completely. I don't want that." "What about Miguel?" Olivia asked. Richard sighed. "I can make inquiries, see what can be done. But I can't promise anything. It wasn't everything, but it was a start." Thomas could see the cautious hope in Olivia's eyes. "I should go call Lily," Thomas said, sensing father and daughter needed time alone. "She'll be worried." As he turned to leave, Richard stood. "Mr. Wilson, a word in the hallway, please." Thomas followed him out, bracing for whatever was coming next. To his surprise, Richard extended his hand. "Thank you for protecting my daughter when I was too blind to see what she really needed," the older man said formally. Thomas shook his hand. "She did most of the protecting herself. She's stronger than you think." "Yes, I'm beginning to see that." Richard hesitated. "I understand you're having some financial difficulties." Thomas stiffened. "We manage. I'm not offering charity," Richard said quickly, reading his reaction. "But perhaps we could discuss your employment situation. My company could use someone with your perspective." Thomas wasn't sure whether to be offended or amused by the awkward offer. "Let's focus on Olivia and the baby for now. Everything else can wait." Richard nodded, a hint of respect in his eyes. "Very well, but the offer stands." As Thomas walked away to call Lily with the good news about baby Gabriel, he reflected on the strange turn his life had taken since that day Olivia had knocked on his door. Nothing would ever be quite the same again, and somehow, that seemed perfectly right. 3 days later, baby Gabriel was released from the NICU. Thomas brought Lily to the hospital that morning, her small hands clutching a teddy bear she'd picked out especially for the newborn. "Is he really tiny?" she asked as they walked through the parking lot. "Like a doll?" "A little bigger than a doll," Thomas replied. And much louder. Lily had been bursting with questions since she'd learned about Gabriel's arrival. She'd insisted on helping to prepare Olivia's room for their return, arranging the second-hand crib and folding the few baby clothes they'd managed to collect. When they reached Olivia's hospital room, they found her dressed in regular clothes, sitting in a chair with Gabriel cradled against her chest. She looked up with a tired smile. "Look who's ready to go home," she said. Lily approached cautiously, her eyes wide as she peered at the bundle in Olivia's arms. "He's so small," she whispered in awe. "Would you like to hold him?" Olivia asked. After Thomas helped position her correctly in a chair, Lily held the baby with solemn concentration. "Hi, Gabriel," she said softly. "I'm Lily. I'm not your sister, but I'm kind of like your sister because we live together." Thomas and Olivia exchanged a smile over her head. A nurse entered with discharge papers and instructions. As they were preparing to leave, Richard Harrington appeared in the doorway, accompanied by a younger man carrying several large shopping bags. "I thought you might need a few things," Richard said, gesturing to the bags. The assistant began unpacking them. Designer baby clothes, the latest model of car seat, and other high-end infant supplies. Olivia's expression was a mixture of gratitude and wariness. The past few days had seen a fragile truce develop between father and daughter, but years of control and conflict couldn't be erased overnight. "Thank you, Dad," she said. "But we already have a car seat." She nodded toward the second-hand model Thomas had installed in his car that morning. Richard eyed it skeptically. "That thing looks ancient. This one has the highest safety rating available. Before Olivia could object, Thomas intervened. Safety first. We'll use the new one. He knew when to pick his battles, and this wasn't one worth fighting. As they left the hospital, an awkward moment arose when Richard's driver pulled up in a luxury SUV. I've arranged a car for you, Richard said. The apartment you've been staying in isn't suitable for a newborn. I've reserved a suite at the riverside until we can find something more permanent. Olivia tensed. Dad, we discussed this. I'm going back to Thomas's place. Be reasonable, Olivia. That building is in a questionable area, probably has outdated wiring, and I doubt it meets current safety codes. Thomas felt a flicker of shame, knowing the billionaire wasn't entirely wrong about his aging apartment building, but Olivia surprised them both. It has everything we need, she said firmly. Good neighbors, a room already set up for Gabriel and people who care about us. She looked at Thomas and Lily. Unless you'd rather we found somewhere else? You're always welcome with us, Thomas assured her, touched by her defense of their humble home. Richard looked like he wanted to argue further, but something in his daughter's expression stopped him. At least let my driver take you there. No sense cramming everyone into that compact car. This compromise was accepted, and soon they were all settled in the spacious SUV, Olivia and Gabriel in the back with Lily, who couldn't stop staring at the baby, while Thomas sat up front with the driver. Richard had excused himself with a promise to check in later, citing urgent business matters. As they pulled away from the hospital, Thomas caught Olivia's eye in the rearview mirror. She gave him a small smile that conveyed both gratitude and relief. Back at the apartment, they discovered Richard had sent ahead more surprises. A professional-grade air purifier had been installed, along with a state-of-the-art baby monitor system. The refrigerator was stocked with prepared meals from an upscale delivery service, and a brand-new rocking chair had replaced the creaky old one in Olivia's room. Your father doesn't do anything halfway, does he? Thomas remarked as they settled Gabriel into his crib for his first nap at home. Never has, Olivia sighed. It's his way of maintaining control. Give people what they need before they even ask, and they're forever in your debt. Despite her words, Thomas could see she was touched by her father's efforts, however heavy-handed they might be. The first week with Gabriel was a blur of sleepless nights, diaper changes, and the constant delicate dance of caring for a newborn. Thomas found himself slipping naturally into a supportive role, making meals when Olivia was nursing, taking Lily to school so Olivia could nap when Gabriel did, and even handling a few midnight feedings with the formula the hospital had provided as a supplement. To everyone's surprise, Richard Harrington kept his distance during that first week, calling daily but respecting Olivia's request for space to bond with her son. The only evidence of his involvement was the steady stream of deliveries, baby supplies, clothing, books, and organic groceries that arrived with predictable regularity. He's trying, Olivia admitted one evening as she and Thomas folded impossibly small onesies in the living room.
In his own way. People can change, Thomas replied.
Though he wasn't entirely convinced the controlling billionaire had undergone a genuine transformation. On the 8th day after their return from the hospital, a certified letter arrived addressed to Thomas. He opened it after dinner, while Olivia was giving Gabriel his bath. His hands shook as he read the contents. It was an eviction notice. The entire building had been sold to a development company, and all tenants had 60 days to vacate. When Olivia returned with a freshly bathed Gabriel, she immediately noticed Thomas's troubled expression. "What's wrong?" she asked, settling into the rocking chair with the baby. Thomas handed her the letter without comment. She read it quickly, her face paling. "This is my father's doing," she said, voice tight with anger. "One of his shell companies must have bought the building. He's forcing us out, so I'll have to accept his help." "We don't know that," Thomas said, though the timing was suspiciously convenient. "I do know it. This is exactly how he operates." Olivia looked down at Gabriel, sleeping peacefully in her arms. "I should have expected this." Before they could discuss it further, a knock sounded at the door. Thomas opened it to find Richard Harrington himself standing in the hallway, dressed impeccably as always. "May I come in?" he asked with uncharacteristic politeness. Thomas stepped aside and Richard entered, his eyes immediately finding Olivia and the baby. "How is my grandson?" he asked, approaching them. "He was fine until you decided to make us homeless," Olivia said coldly, holding up the eviction notice. Richard looked genuinely confused. What are you talking about? This building was just sold. Everyone's being evicted. Are you saying that's just a coincidence? Richard took the letter, scanning it quickly. Landmark Development, he read aloud. That's not one of my companies, Olivia. But you know them, she pressed. I know of them, he corrected. They're competitors. They've been buying up properties in this area for months. He seemed troubled. I had no idea they'd purchased this building. Thomas watched the exchange carefully. Either Richard was an exceptional actor, or he was genuinely surprised by the eviction notice. So you didn't arrange this to force me to move into one of your properties? Olivia asked, still skeptical. No, Richard replied firmly, though I won't pretend I'm not concerned about you living here. Lily emerged from her room then, dressed in pajamas. Grandpa Rich? She exclaimed, rushing over to give him a hug. The nickname had developed during Richard's visits over the past week. Despite Thomas's initial discomfort, the older man had shown surprising patience with Lily's endless questions, even bringing her educational games and books. Richard's stern expression softened as he greeted Lily. It was the most genuine Thomas ever saw him, these brief moments with a child who wanted nothing from him but attention. After Thomas had put Lily to bed, the adults gathered in the living room to discuss the eviction situation. 60 days isn't much time to find a new place, Thomas said, mentally calculating how much he could afford for a security deposit while still covering their current rent. I may have a solution, Richard said carefully. I recently acquired a small apartment building as part of a larger deal. It's nothing fancy, but it's well maintained in a decent neighborhood and close to good schools. Thomas and Olivia exchanged wary glances. What's the catch? Olivia asked. No catch. I need a building manager, someone who lives on site and handles minor repairs, tenant concerns, that sort of thing. Richard looked at Thomas. The position includes a reduced rent apartment, 2 bedrooms, with the option to expand into the adjacent 1-bedroom if needed. Thomas was suspicious. Why would you offer this to me? You barely know me. Richard seemed uncomfortable with the direct question. My daughter trusts you. That counts for something. After a pause, he added, and I've had you thoroughly investigated, of course. Dad, Olivia protested. It's fine, Thomas said, unsurprised. I'd have done the same in his position. He addressed Richard directly. What did your investigation find? A hard-working man who's had some bad luck but never stopped providing for his daughter. No criminal record. Good references from former employers. Modest debt, mostly medical bills from your late wife's illness. Richard delivered the assessment clinically. In short, exactly who you appear to be. Thomas wasn't sure whether to be offended or flattered by this invasion of his privacy. And this job offer, is it real or just a way to keep tabs on Olivia and Gabriel? Both, Richard admitted with unexpected candor. The position exists. The building needs a manager. But yes, it would give me peace of mind to know my daughter and grandson are in a decent place, with someone I can trust nearby. What do you think? Thomas asked Olivia. She considered for a long moment. It's suspiciously convenient. But we do need to find a new place, she turned to her father. No strings attached? No using this to control what I do or who I see. You'd be free to live your life as you choose, Richard promised. I'm trying to help, not control. After more discussion and careful negotiation of terms, including a formal contract that Richard promised to have drawn up the next day, they tentatively agreed to the arrangement. Richard prepared to leave. He hesitated at the door. There's one more thing. He reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew an envelope. I had my people locate Miguel Rodriguez. Olivia gasped, taking the envelope with trembling hands. Where is he? Working on his uncle's farm near Guadalajara. He has no legal way to return to the States, but Richard seemed uncomfortable. I've included contact information and the name of an immigration attorney who might be able to help, if that's what you want. Olivia stared at her father in disbelief. Why would you do this? You hated Miguel? I never knew him, Richard corrected. I just knew he was taking my daughter away. He glanced at Gabriel, sleeping in his portable bassinet. But that child deserves to know his father if possible, and you deserve to make that choice for yourself. After Richard left, Olivia sat holding the envelope, tears streaming down her face. Are you going to call him? Thomas asked gently. I don't know, she admitted. So much has happened. What if he's moved on? What if he doesn't want anything to do with us now? Thomas sat beside her on the couch. There's only one way to find out. She nodded, carefully opening the envelope to reveal a phone number and address. Will you stay with me while I call? In case it goes badly? Of course, Thomas promised, struck by how vulnerable she looked. In that moment, not the refined heiress or the determined single mother, but simply a young woman afraid of rejection. Olivia dialed the international number with shaking hands and put the phone on speaker. After several rings, a man's voice answered in Spanish. Bueno? Olivia froze, her eyes wide. Hola? ¿Quién es? The voice continued. Thomas nudged her gently. Say something, he whispered. Miguel, she finally managed, her voice barely audible. Es Olivia. There was a moment of stunned silence, then a torrent of Spanish too rapid for Thomas to follow with his limited high school knowledge of the language. Olivia responded in kind, tears flowing freely now. Thomas moved to give her privacy, but she grabbed his hand, holding him in place as she continued the emotional conversation. After about 20 minutes, Olivia finally ended the call, wiping her eyes. He thought I'd chosen my father's money over him, she explained. When his family was deported, he tried to contact me but couldn't get through. Eventually, he gave up, thinking I'd abandoned him. And now, Thomas asked cautiously, he was shocked to hear about Gabriel. A small smile appeared through her tears. He wants to meet his son. He asked if he could video chat tomorrow. That's good, right? Olivia nodded slowly. I think so. It's complicated. We have a lot to work through. But at least now Gabriel will know his father, even if it's just through a screen for a while. As Thomas helped her put Gabriel down for the night in his crib, he found himself contemplating the strange turns life could take. 2 months ago, he'd been a struggling single dad on the verge of eviction. Now he was helping a billionaire's daughter reconnect with her baby's father, while considering a job offer from one of the richest men in the country. What are you thinking about? Olivia asked, noticing his thoughtful expression. Just how unpredictable life can be, he replied. Sometimes the worst moments lead to something unexpected. Olivia touched his arm gently. Like renting a room to a strange pregnant girl? Thomas smiled. Exactly like that. As they stood watching Gabriel sleep, their lives still in flux but somehow moving toward something more hopeful, Thomas realized that family could be found in the most unlikely places, and that sometimes, the best thing you can do when life gets complicated is to simply hold on and see where the journey leads. 1 year later, Thomas stood in the courtyard of the apartment building, supervising as a maintenance worker installed new playground equipment. The modest building had transformed under his management. Fresh paint, repaired fixtures, and a sense of community fostered through monthly tenant gatherings. Looking good, called a familiar voice. Thomas turned to see Olivia approaching, pushing Gabriel in a stroller. At 13 months old, the boy was a bundle of energy, with his mother's blue eyes and his father's warm complexion. Just in time for his first birthday party tomorrow, Thomas replied, smiling at Gabriel, who squealed and reached for him. They had all moved into the apartment building Richard had offered, though not exactly as planned. Thomas managed the property and lived in a renovated 2-bedroom unit with Lily, who was now 11. Olivia and Gabriel occupied the adjacent apartment, with a connecting door they usually left open. The arrangement had evolved naturally, giving everyone their own space while allowing them to function as a blended family unit. Did Miguel's package arrive? Thomas asked as he lifted Gabriel from the stroller, tossing him gently in the air to the boy's delight. This morning, Olivia confirmed. A handmade wooden train set. It's beautiful. The past year had seen regular video calls between Gabriel and his father, who remained in Mexico. The immigration attorney Richard had recommended was still working on Miguel's case, exploring options for a work or family visa. The process was slow, but there was cautious hope. And your father, still coming tomorrow? Olivia nodded. With bells on, he's probably bringing half the toy store again. Richard Harrington's relationship with his daughter and grandson had evolved into something neither had expected. He visited weekly, gradually earning back Olivia's trust through consistent respect for her boundaries. With Gabriel, he was a doting grandfather who got down on the floor to play, something his corporate associates would never have believed possible. Mr. Wilson, a tenant waved from across the courtyard. Got a minute? My sink is doing that thing again. Duty calls, Thomas said, handing Gabriel back to Olivia. I'll be home for dinner. Home. The word had taken on new meaning over the past year. As Thomas headed off to address the plumbing issue, Olivia continued her walk through the neighborhood. Gabriel babbled happily, pointing at dogs and buses with equal enthusiasm. She stopped at the small corner market run by an elderly couple who had become like surrogate grandparents to Gabriel. There's our favorite little man, Mrs. Patel exclaimed, coming around the counter to chuck Gabriel under the chin. And how is our Olivia today? Good, Olivia replied, still warmed by the easy acceptance she'd found in this community. No one here cared about her family name or bank account. They knew her only as Thomas's friend with the cute baby. Your weekly order is ready, Mr. Patel said, bringing out a box of fresh produce. I added those peaches Gabriel likes. Thank you, Olivia said, reaching for her wallet. No. Already taken care of, Mrs. Patel said with a wink. Thomas called ahead again, didn't he? Olivia asked, half exasperated, half touched. The older woman just smiled knowingly. Back at the apartment, Olivia settled Gabriel in his play area and began preparing dinner. Cooking was a skill she'd cultivated over the past year, transforming from someone who burned toast to someone who could prepare decent family meals. Her laptop chimed with an incoming video call, right on schedule. She accepted, and Miguel's face appeared on screen. Hola, mi amor, he greeted her warmly. Right on time, she replied, angling the screen so he could see Gabriel playing. Papa, Gabriel called, recognizing Miguel immediately. Though they had never met in person, Miguel had become a constant presence in his son's life through daily video calls. He sang Spanish lullabies, read bedtime stories, and watched his son's first steps through a screen. Not ideal, but better than the complete absence Richard had initially engineered. Big day tomorrow, Miguel said after chatting with Gabriel for a few minutes. I wish I could be there. Me too, Olivia said softly. Any news? Miguel's face brightened. Actually, yes. The lawyer thinks we have a good case with the family visa. She's submitting the final paperwork next week. Olivia tried not to get her hopes up too high. They'd had promising leads before that had fizzled out. The immigration system was complex and often frustrating. That's great news, she said cautiously. And there's something else, Miguel continued. I've been saving. If the visa comes through, I'll have enough for the move and first few months until I find work. Olivia had offered money many times, but Miguel had always declined. His pride was something she'd come to respect even when it complicated matters. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Lily, home from her after-school program. Hi, Miguel, she called, popping into frame. Guess what? I got an A on my Spanish test. Excelente, he praised. Your accent is getting much better. Lily had taken a keen interest in learning Spanish, practicing diligently with both Miguel and Mrs. Gonzalez from apartment 3B. It was one of many ways their unusual family had adapted and grown together. After finishing the call, Olivia and Lily worked together to prepare dinner, with Gabriel helping by banging wooden spoons on the floor. The domestic scene would have been unimaginable to Olivia 2 years ago, when she was living in her father's mansion, attending charity galas, and going through the motions of a life that had never quite fit. Thomas arrived home just as they were setting the table, bringing with him the easy warmth that had become the foundation of their household. Mrs. Chen says the plumbing is fixed, Lily reported, having run into their former neighbor who had followed them to the new building. And she wants to know when you're going to ask Olivia to marry you. Thomas choked on his water, while Olivia nearly dropped the serving spoon. Mrs. Chen needs to mind her own business, Thomas said, his ears reddening. Lily looked between the two adults with innocent curiosity. Well, aren't you going to? We already live together anyway. And you like each other. I see you looking at each other when you think nobody's watching. Lily, Thomas warned, though there was no real anger in his voice. Olivia busied herself with serving the food, her heart racing. The subject wasn't entirely new to her thoughts. Over the months of living side by side, raising their children together, sharing meals and problems and occasional late-night conversations, her feelings for Thomas had grown into something deeper than friendship. But the situation was complicated. There was Gabriel's father to consider, her own complicated relationship with her family, and the question of whether Thomas felt the same way. Sorry, Lily mumbled, though she didn't look particularly sorry. The moment passed, and dinner continued with talk of Gabriel's upcoming birthday celebration and Lily's school project. Later that night, after the children were asleep, Thomas knocked softly on the connecting door between their apartments. Olivia was sitting at her small desk, reviewing business proposals for the foundation she'd started for single parents. "Got a minute?" he asked. "Sure," she replied, setting aside her work. He sat on the edge of her sofa, looking uncharacteristically nervous. About what Lily said at dinner. "Kids say the darndest things," Olivia said lightly, trying to ease his obvious discomfort. "Yeah, they do." He paused, rubbing the back of his neck. "But sometimes they just say out loud what adults are thinking." Olivia's heart skipped. "What do you mean?" "I mean," Thomas took a deep breath, "I've been thinking about us, about what we've built here. It's not conventional, but it works. We work." "We do," she agreed softly. "And I've been wondering if maybe we should consider making it official somehow, not just for the kids but for us." He looked up, meeting her eyes directly. "I care about you, Olivia. More than I expected to, more than I thought I could after losing Lily's mom." Olivia felt tears welling in her eyes. "I care about you too. But there's Miguel," Thomas continued. "And I would never want to come between Gabriel and his father." "It's complicated," Olivia admitted. "Miguel and I were in love once, but we're different people now. We'll always be connected through Gabriel, but—" She hesitated, struggling to articulate her feelings. "What about you? Are you ready for someone with my kind of baggage? A billionaire father who'll never completely approve a baby with another man? A life that's nothing like what you're used to?" Thomas smiled. "Have you looked at our life lately? Nothing about it is what I'm used to. That's what makes it special." He moved to sit beside her, taking her hand. "I'm not proposing, not yet, but I wanted you to know that's where my heart is heading. No pressure, no timeline, just something to think about." Olivia squeezed his hand, overwhelmed by the simple honesty of his words. "I think about it too," she confessed. "More than I probably should." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the weight of unspoken possibilities hovering between them. "One day at a time?" Thomas suggested. Olivia nodded. One day at a time. The next day brought the controlled chaos of Gabriel's first birthday party. The small courtyard was decorated with balloons and streamers, and tenants from throughout the building stopped by to celebrate. Richard arrived precisely on time, carrying a gift that was mercifully just one reasonably sized package rather than the mountain of presents they'd feared. "Just a little something," he said, handing it to Olivia before scooping up Gabriel, who recognized his grandfather immediately and reached for his tie. Thomas watched the interaction with quiet satisfaction. For all his faults, Richard had made genuine efforts to change, to respect boundaries, to be the father and grandfather his family needed rather than the one he thought they should have. Mrs. Chen sidled up beside Thomas. "Very good seeing family together like this," she observed. "But still waiting for wedding invitation," Thomas laughed. "Patience, Mrs. Chen." "At my age, patience is luxury," she replied tartly. "Don't wait too long." As the party progressed, Thomas found himself constantly aware of Olivia. Her laugh as she helped Gabriel unwrap gifts, her gracious thanks to neighbors who had brought small presents, her easy conversation with his daughter. In quiet moments, their eyes would meet across the courtyard, a private understanding passing between them. The biggest surprise came mid-afternoon, when a taxi pulled up outside the gate. Thomas noticed Olivia freeze, her eyes wide with shock. A young man emerged from the cab, paying the driver before turning toward the party. He was in his late 20s, with warm brown skin and a nervous smile. In his hands was a colorfully wrapped package. "Miguel?" Olivia whispered, hardly believing her eyes. She rushed forward as he entered the courtyard, stopping just short of embracing him. "How are you here?" Miguel glanced past her to where Richard stood with Gabriel. "Your father," he explained. "He arranged a temporary visa, just for 2 weeks, but—" He shrugged. "I couldn't miss my son's first birthday." Olivia turned to her father in disbelief. Richard looked uncomfortable with the attention but nodded slightly in acknowledgement. Gabriel, sensing the emotional shift, began squirming in his grandfather's arms. Richard brought him over, and for the first time Miguel held his son. "Hola, mijijo," he said softly, tears in his eyes. "Papa is here." Gabriel studied the familiar face he'd only seen on screens, then reached out to touch Miguel's cheek with perfect trust. "Papa," he repeated, recognizing the man from their daily calls. Thomas moved to stand beside Olivia, offering silent support as she watched father and son meet in person for the first time. "Did you know about this?" she asked Richard when he joined them. "I may have expedited certain paperwork," Richard admitted. "Consider it my gift to both of you." The party continued with a new energy, the strange assembled family finding its balance once again. Miguel was welcomed warmly, particularly by Lily, who was thrilled to practice her Spanish with a native speaker. As the afternoon wore on, Thomas found himself observing the scene with a sense of wonder. His life had been transformed by the simple decision to rent a room to a stranger in need. Now here they all were, a single father, a runaway heiress, an estranged grandfather, a father separated by borders, all brought together by one small boy blowing out his first birthday candle with more help than he needed. Later, as the party wound down and Gabriel napped exhausted from the excitement, Thomas found Olivia and Miguel deep in conversation on a bench beneath the old oak tree. He started to turn away, not wanting to intrude, but Olivia spotted him and waved him over. "We were just talking about the future," she said, as Thomas sat beside her. "Miguel's lawyer thinks the family visa might come through within a few months." Thomas nodded, unsure what this meant for their unconventional family. "That's great news. I want to be part of Gabriel's life," Miguel explained. "To see him grow up, teach him things, be a real father." He looked at Thomas with unexpected warmth. "But Olivia tells me you have already been like a father to him." "I just help out where I can," Thomas replied modestly. Miguel shook his head. "It is more than that. My son knows your voice, your face. He reaches for you. These are not small things." Thomas didn't know how to respond. The truth was he had come to love Gabriel as if he were his own son, just as he'd come to care deeply for Olivia. But he'd always known Miguel's potential return was part of the equation. "We've been discussing arrangements," Olivia continued. When Miguel gets his visa, he'll need a place to stay while he gets established." Thomas saw where this was heading. "We have the studio apartment on the first floor. It's small, but it would be close by." Miguel looked surprised. "You would do that?" "Gabriel deserves to have his father in his life," Thomas said simply. "We can make it work." What followed was a candid conversation about their unusual situation, how they might navigate co-parenting, boundaries, and the complex emotions involved. Miguel spoke of his plans to find work in construction, perhaps eventually go back to school. Olivia shared her hopes for Gabriel to know his Mexican heritage alongside the life they'd built here. Throughout it all, Thomas was struck by how adult and measured the discussion remained. There were no jealous accusations, no territorial posturing, just three people trying to do right by a child they all loved. As evening fell and guests departed, Richard approached Thomas while Olivia was showing Miguel around the building. "You're a better man than I gave you credit for," the billionaire said bluntly. Thomas raised an eyebrow. "Because I didn't throw a fit about Miguel showing up?" "That and everything else." Richard gestured to the building around them. "You've turned this place around completely. The tenants respect you. My daughter trusts you. My grandson adores you." He paused. "And you didn't take advantage of any of it." "That was never what this was about," Thomas replied. Richard nodded slowly. "I'm beginning to understand that." He hesitated, then added, "I've been thinking of expanding this model, renovating affordable housing properties, installing resident managers who actually care. Would you be interested in overseeing such a project?" Thomas stared at him in surprise. "Are you offering me a job?" "A partnership of sorts." Richard shrugged, trying to appear casual, though Thomas could tell the offer was significant coming from him. "Your practical experience, my resources, could do some good." Before Thomas could respond, Lily came running up, breathless with excitement. "Dad! Miguel says he can help with my science project. He used to work in a lab before he was a gardener, and he knows all about plants and growing stuff." Thomas smiled at his daughter's enthusiasm. "That sounds great, sweetie. Why don't you go help Mrs. Chen with the cleanup?" As Lily dashed off, Richard chuckled. "She's a remarkable child." "She is," Thomas agreed proudly. "Think about my offer," Richard said, returning to business. "No rush. Family comes first. That's one lesson I've finally learned." The following weeks brought a new rhythm to their lives. Miguel stayed in a nearby hotel but spent his days with them, getting to know his son in person, sharing meals with the family, and slowly finding his place in their world. Olivia watched with growing peace as Gabriel formed a bond with his biological father while maintaining his attachment to Thomas. The two men developed a surprising camaraderie, Miguel teaching Thomas Spanish phrases while Thomas showed Miguel the intricacies of building maintenance. One evening, after Gabriel had fallen asleep and Miguel had returned to his hotel, Thomas and Olivia found themselves alone on the small balcony of her apartment, sharing a glass of wine under the stars. "This is working better than I expected," Olivia admitted. "I was so afraid there would be tension, jealousy. There probably will be sometimes," Thomas said realistically. "We're only human, but we all want what's best for Gabriel." Olivia leaned her head against his shoulder. "And for Lily. Did you see her face when Miguel helped with her project? She was so excited. She's always wanted a bigger family," Thomas said softly. "After her mom died, she used to ask why it was just the two of us." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the sounds of the neighborhood a gentle backdrop to their thoughts. "I've been thinking about your father's offer," Thomas finally said. "The housing project?" Olivia looked up. "What do you think?" "I think it could do a lot of good. Give more families stable housing, create communities." He turned to face her. "But I'd want to do it right. Not just slapping fresh paint on old problems, but creating real solutions." "You'd be amazing at it," she said with conviction. Thomas hesitated, then took her hand. "Would you consider working on it with me? Your foundation already supports single parents. This could be an extension of that work." Olivia's eyes widened. "You mean as partners?" "In every sense," he replied quietly. The words hung between them, weighted with meaning. Slowly, Olivia leaned forward and kissed him, their first kiss somehow both surprising and inevitable. When they pulled apart, she smiled. "One day at a time, remember?" "I remember," he said, returning her smile. Today just happened to be the right day. 3 months later, they gathered in the courthouse, Thomas and Lily, Olivia and Gabriel, Richard in an uncharacteristically casual suit, Mrs. Chen dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief, and Miguel, newly arrived with his approved visa, watching with genuine goodwill. The immigration judge reviewed the final paperwork granting Miguel legal residency status with the right to work. His apartment in their building was ready, his construction job secured through one of Richard's contacts, and his place in Gabriel's life firmly established. "Congratulations." "Mr. Rodriguez," the judge said, stamping the final document. "Welcome to your new beginning." As they exited the courthouse, Richard pulled Thomas aside. "The first property for our housing initiative closes next week. Are you ready?" Thomas looked across the steps where Olivia was laughing with Lily, Gabriel balanced on her hip, Miguel taking photos to send to his family back home. This unlikely collection of people had become his family, expanded, unconventional, occasionally complicated, but bound together by something stronger than blood or legal documents. "More than ready," he replied. That evening, they celebrated with a dinner in the courtyard, tables pushed together to accommodate everyone. Tenants brought dishes to share. Music played from someone's portable speaker, and children ran playing between the adults. As the stars came out, Thomas found Olivia watching Gabriel, who was now sound asleep in Miguel's arms while the younger man chatted comfortably with Lily about her science project. "Penny for your thoughts," Thomas said, slipping his arm around Olivia's waist. "I was just thinking about that day you opened your door to a strange pregnant girl," she replied. "How different everything would be if you'd turned me away." "I almost did," he admitted. "We were struggling so much already." "Why didn't you?" Thomas considered the question. "Something told me you needed help more than I needed that extra security deposit." Olivia laughed softly. "Little did you know what you were getting into." "Best decision I ever made," he said simply. Across the courtyard, Richard was deep in conversation with Mrs. Chen, who appeared to be giving him cooking tips he was earnestly noting on his phone. The billionaire had undergone perhaps the most surprising transformation of all, learning to listen rather than dictate, to support rather than control. "Do you think we'll ever be a normal family?" Olivia asked, watching her father with amused disbelief. Thomas pulled her closer. "What's normal anyway?" We have love, respect, support, everything that really matters. As the night grew late, they gathered to watch Gabriel take unsteady steps between Miguel and Lily, each small success celebrated with cheers. Thomas felt Olivia's hand slip into his, their fingers intertwining naturally. 1 year ago, Thomas had been a struggling single father facing eviction. Now he stood at the center of a family that defied convention, but worked in all the ways that mattered, with new purpose and a future filled with possibility, all because he'd opened his door to a stranger in need, never imagining that in helping her, he would ultimately be saving himself. And as he looked around at the faces of those he loved, Lily's bright enthusiasm, Gabriel's innocent joy, Miguel's grateful presence, Richard's hard-won wisdom, and Olivia's quiet strength beside him, Thomas knew that sometimes the most beautiful stories begin with the simplest acts of kindness. "Look," Olivia whispered, pointing to where Gabriel had finally managed 3 consecutive steps on his own. "He's going to run before we know it," Thomas said, "and we'll all be there to catch him when he falls," Olivia replied, resting her head on his shoulder. In that moment, surrounded by the family they had built together, Thomas realized that the true miracle wasn't just that a poor single dad had unwittingly rented a room to a runaway millionaire's daughter. It was that in doing so, they had all found their way home.